Did you know that small and medium-sized enterprises represent 99% of all businesses in the EU and account for 70% of all jobs? Close to 45% of GDP in the EU was generated by IPR-intensive industries. SMEs are the motor of the EU economy. Their potential to boost employment and drive future innovation, two key priorities for the European Union, should not be overlooked. SMEs are particularly present in innovative industries such as clean technologies, healthcare, ICT, etc. Today, more and more SMEs are looking for business opportunities in emerging markets. Many of those companies are considering China, Southeast Asia, and Latin America as potential destinations. Trade relations between the EU and emerging markets have taken a new turn with the ongoing negotiation of FTAs and investment agreements. These regions are attractive destinations for European investors, with their fast-growing markets, rising middle classes, and competitiveness. Due to limited resources and available capacity, SMEs face many difficulties in managing their IP assets, and particularly when this involves IPR infringement in other regions. Intangible assets such as intellectual property rights are key factors in the competitiveness of businesses in the global economy. We have to be aware that IPR-intensive industries contributed 86% of imports and 93% of exports to EU external trade. And in developing markets such as Southeast Asia, Latin American countries and China, your trademark, patent, trade secret, industrial design are endangered. Before internationalizing your business, take an active part in protecting your assets. The International IPR SME Helpdesks are here to assist you and contribute to SMEs internationalization by the provision of step-by-step advice to build a successful IPR strategy for entering into the Chinese, Southeast Asian and/or Latin American markets. The range of services offered by the Helpdesk includes a 24-hour helpline service to reply to IPR questions, free online and on-site trainings delivered by IPR experts, free publications on various IPR topics and country fact sheets, and other useful information forms such as case studies, e-learning modules, video podcasts, and more. So if you have any inquiries on IP protection, contact the Helpdesk in China, SEA, or Latin America to learn how to manage your IP assets and expand your business successfully.
Good afternoon, Vietnam. Good morning, those joining us from Europe. Welcome to our webinar, Vietnam's Thriving E-Commerce Market in a Changing Environment. This webinar is brought to you by the Southeast Asia IPSME Helpdesk project and EuroCham Vietnam. My name is Nora. I'm the project manager for the SCA IPSME Helpdesk project. I will be today's webinar moderator. Joining me, Benoit Tardy, IP business advisor of the project, and he will be conducting the Q&A session. Before we get started, let me quickly go through the housekeeping rules. So today's webinar is recorded, so you will also have access to the recording a few days after the webinar. We will inform you via email. We are looking forward to an interactive webinar, so please use the chat box and type in any questions, comments you have, and we will be happy to discuss it with you during the Q&A session. If you have any issue, just type in the chat box and then we can also assist you. And I would like to welcome our outstanding speakers today. So just a quick introduction. We have with us Delphine Rousselet, Executive Director of EuroCham Vietnam, Erwin Debare, Secretary General of EuroCham Vietnam and Financial Director of Perfetti Van Melle, Ms. Tran Nguyen, Director at Nielsen, Matthew Leray, Managing Partner at Acclaim Vietnam, and Ms. Yan Wu, External Expert of the IP SME Helpdesk and Country Manager of Rouse, and also Chairwoman of IPR Sector Committee of EuroCham. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. I will update you quickly on what the Helpdesk is doing in case you missed the video. After that, I will give the floor to Delphine to update you of a very meaningful project that EuroCham has launched very recently. Then Erwin will give the welcome remarks and briefly introduce you to today's webinar topic. Then Mitch Tran will explain you a little bit where the e-commerce market stands in Vietnam. Matthew will give you some insights on how to set up an e-commerce business and overcome regulatory challenges. And Yen Wu will be giving you some practical tips how to deal with online counterfeiting, and also what is Vietnam doing to achieve a safer environment for the e-commerce operators. And then we will wrap up the webinar with a Q&A, hopefully interactive Q&A session. So let me take 2 more minutes from you. So the IPSME Helpdesk project is an initiative of the European Commission, and the project is implemented by EuroCham Vietnam in Southeast Asia. The goal of this project is to support EU SMEs, startups to protect and enforce their IP rights when expanding operating in Southeast Asia. We cover the 10 ASEAN countries. Very important that all services we offer are free of charge. And you can see on the slide, so we have an inquiry helpline. So if you are a business and you have any questions on IP, you are welcome to get in touch with us and we will reply your question within 3 working days. We organize trainings, workshops throughout the year in Europe, in Southeast Asia, since COVID is with us, mainly online. We have a wide variety of guides and fact sheets available on our website that you can check out. And we also offer some interactive learning tools such as e-learning modules, videos, and podcasts. So now, without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Delphine.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you so much. I hope the sound is working properly.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words during this webinar. It's a great chance to share with you all this initiative EuroCham launched last week. It's something extremely recent. Basically, we wanted to make something impactful and meaningful for Vietnam during this very, very difficult time we are all going through. Still, some of us are very lucky, but others are really in pain. So we decided to launch this project, which is basically here to support hospitals in need of equipment. We all know that providing and bringing to Vietnam vaccines is almost impossible. This is a government-to-government topic. But where we could make something very meaningful, it's about providing equipment, must-needed equipment in those hospitals that are actually struggling a lot. So we decided to start this campaign. It's a fundraising campaign with a very, very transparent process. This is where we as EuroCham can, of course, bring a real added value. It's in making sure that the whole donation process is absolutely transparent. As you can see here on the screen, it's only a 4 steps thing. Basically, we receive the donations from every donator. It can be corporate donation, individual donation. There is no minimum amount. Every penny means something. So we opened a dedicated bank account here in Vietnam, dedicated to this precise fund. And we are already collecting the money from members and non-members, corporate and individuals, okay? There is a website dedicated where you can see the amounts that are increasing day after day. We have 2 counters on this website. You can see the website on the bottom left or here as well. In this website, you can see the 2 counters, the yellow one, which is indicating the amount that is increasing every day, and the blue one is the amount that we are spending to donate to hospitals. So far, we didn't donate too much because we are still collecting money, but we received a lot of inquiries from hospitals, and at the same time, we received also a lot of very high interest from donors, not only in Vietnam, but also abroad. My purpose today is just to share with you, because we are already 150 people now on this webinar. The idea is to spread the word, to make it a news, so everybody knows that we are conducting that. Again, every donation is more than welcome, and we will make sure to make it efficient and to bring it where it's the most needed. This is all from my side. You can have all information on the dedicated website, breatheagain.fund, and also on EuroCham website. You can contact any of us, any of our team. Anyone is aware, anyone is here to support, to reply to your questions, and to guide you to the procedure. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Delphine. And yes, in the follow-up message of this webinar, we will also include the details for Breathe Again Vietnam project, so you can also check out further information. So now we will move to the next point of the agenda, and I would like to invite Erwin to take over the floor. So you need, yes, we need to unmute you.
Yes, I think now everybody hears me, yeah.
So let's check. Can you share your screen, Erwin, or you want us to share on our side?
I think I'm sharing, but okay, does that work? Yeah.
Yes, good. Just put it full screen.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome also from my side. First of all, I would like you to wish you a good health, a safe place, and also a lot of resilience in these crazy times. It has almost become a luxury to be an hour mentally away from COVID vaccines and social distancing. So I would say enjoy the hour that is ahead of us. We have very interesting speakers and a very interesting topic, so it will be very learningful. As a board member of EuroCham, I'm overseeing the EU-funded projects in which EuroCham is participating. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to see the team of Nora running the IPR Helpdesk and bringing that much added value to the businesses which are operating here in this region. And there are the free webinars, the articles, trainings, really a lot that is supporting you if you are in need of help with IPR. And I would suggest you to reach out to the team of Nora. Besides the IPR Helpdesk, EuroCham is also supporting its members with IPR and e-commerce, specifically through the sector committees. 3 of them have explicitly mentioned in the new white book the topic of IPR and e-commerce. That's the IPR sector committee itself, also the wines and spirits sector committee, and cosmetics. So you can reach out to these sector committees if you're in that industry, or you can reach out to the EuroCham team. For sure, with the advocacy team, we will be able to support you if you have any challenges in that area. Nora already mentioned that I'm the finance director for Perfettiva Melle. That's actually my job. You know our company for sure, because we produce Mentos, Chupa Chups, Alpenliebe. And it's with keen interest that I've been following the developments in e-commerce here in Vietnam. It was supposed to be an hour without COVID, but we will need to mention that indeed COVID has impacted the way that shoppers behave themselves on the retail market. We see more and more people ordering from supermarkets, from convenience stores, or ordering via e-commerce. And also when it comes to payments, more and more the hygienic, so-called hygienic payments methods are on the rise. We see also that consumers, shoppers are going back to basics, more focusing on the personal care or let's say the home care products. Also, they are more focusing on whether they can buy something cheaper, a B brand or a cheaper alternative, or even if within a certain category the favorite product is not available, they may need to go to a near category product. Yeah, most probably the back to normal will be back to new normal. And we will see continued situations of work from home for longer or shorter periods, or as a new way of working. We will see increased shopping online, and also more focus on wellness-related products.
From Ms. Tran, to discuss a little bit more about the e-commerce market of Vietnam. Hi, Tran. I can already see your screen. If you can put it on full screen, and we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so hello everyone. Before that, we starting the presentation, I just would like to say a big thank you to EuroCham Vietnam and also IPR SME Helpdesk in order inviting us to this webinar. So in today's section, my name is Jung and I'm represent for Nelson IQ Vietnam to share with you about the Vietnam landscape and e-commerce market. In today's presentation, there will be 3 parts. The first one is about Vietnam market and FMCG landscape in overall, so that we can see how the situation in Vietnam market right now, especially during the pandemics. The second one is about the evolution of retail channels and e-commerce in Vietnam right now. And the last but not least that we would like to share with you is the online shoppers in Vietnam, how they are and what they are doing right now. For the first section, so let's open up with the overall pictures of the economics in Vietnam. So we all know that for Vietnam, we only try in order to increase the GDP year over year. But what you can see from here is that even by Q2 of this year versus year ago, the GDP growth is still maintained at 6.6%. And this is coming from the own sectors of the GDP, especially the industrial and construction is up to 10%. In terms of the consumer price index, the question is that whether the consumer price index is increasing or not. And right now we still see that over a quarter, the government try in order to control the CPI below 3%. But for this year, when we're looking at Q2 of this year versus year ago, the CPI increasing up by 2.7%. And this is coming from the increased price and also the demand for the necessity. The next question that we're gonna have is about the status of the pandemic, how it impacts in terms of the consumer sentiment. And the answer is that we all know about the wave 4 of COVID-19 in Vietnam, starting by end of April. Up to now, the cases just increasing. And this is the reason why we also see that the unemployment rate and underemployment rate also increasing quarter by quarter as well, when we look at quarter 1 and quarter 2. From the news of the government, we also know that there are more and more businesses, they need to shut down, or they need to do the form of shutting down the business. And this is when calculated over the 7 months of this year versus year ago, we already see that the number of the business need to close down. This is around 79,000 business, means that it's around 400 business per day. This is also impact in terms of the consumer confidence index, means that whether the consumer feel optimistic or pessimistic about the current situation. For Vietnamese consumer year over year, when we measure about this one, we know that Vietnamese consumer, they always optimistic. And this is the reason why their CCI is over 100. But if you notice from here, you will see that since Q4 of last year up to Q2 of this year, the CCI declining. So from 121, now moving down to 140. And with the current situation of COVID still happening like this one, we can expect that Q3 also see the declining in terms of the consumer sentiment as well. The next one is that the question you may have is how about the FMCG consumption? So when we measure the FMCG consumption year over year, what we can see is that the fast-moving consumer goods also impacted by the pandemics, especially when you're looking at the last 12 months, since July of last year until June of this year, you will see that the value growth of total FMCG declined by minus 3.5%. And this is mainly driven by the volume consumption by 4%. Only except right now by Q2, we can see that this is the bouncing back in terms of the FMCG growth rate. But this is mainly from the stockpiling of consumers. And we can see that this is clearer when it's coming to July and August, when the consumer, especially in Ho Chi Minh City, where they need to stock up during the decree of the government. So for the first part, we already know that for pandemics, also about the COVID-19, its impact a lot in terms of the consumer and also in terms of the FMCG consumption as well. Now, the next question is how about the retail channels and e-commerce in Vietnam market? Let's look at the picture of Asia first. And what we can see from here is that we putting here for traditional trade market in the black color. We also have hyper and supermarket. We have CVS and Minimart. We have the online channel. So right now in Asia, we still see that 50% contribution, this is from the traditional trade market. But what we also noted is the increase year over year of online channel. By 2018, online contributed by 6% in terms of the value consumption of FMCG. But now it's also increasing, and by Q4 of last year, it already contributed by 13%. This is coming from the growth of online channel. So as you can see here, for online channel in terms of the growth rate, when we compare 2019 versus year ago, the growth rate of online channel in Asia is up to 40%. And even when we're looking at Q4 of last year versus year ago, the growth rate is still also at double digit by 20%. Now, when moving back into Vietnam market, we also see about the evolution of the retail channels, even during the pandemic. So the first one that I would like to share with you is about the store expansion of retail channels, especially in modern trade. So when we have the modern trade as a total number of stores here, we also divided by each of the store type. So we have supermarket as the red color, then we have mini-mart store, we have convenience store, we have health and beauty and drugstore, and the last but not least is about mom and baby channel. So when we're looking at in terms of the number of stores by month, from June last year until June of this year, we see that modern trade retailers in Vietnam, they still try in order to expand in terms of the number of stores. Because we know that in Vietnam market, traditional trade contribute up to 80%, right? But actually modern trade is still keeps developing and booming. So right now we can point out that when we compare June of this year versus December of last year, we see the growth rate in terms of store expansion of mom and baby channel, of health and beauty by 12%, and follow up by CVS and Minimart. If you're asking me about the key chain who can drive for such expansion, so we can name some of the key chain. For example, like Con Cưng in mom and baby channel, we have Pharmacity in health and beauty and drugstores to opening the stores, and we also have Circle K in CVS. This is not only about the store expansion. This is also about the innovative approach that the retailers, even though this is the modern trade retailers or traditional trade retailers doing during the COVID-19 situation. The first one that I would like to share with you is how they can reach the new consumers. So there are two things that they are doing right now. The first one is about partnership. So we can highlight some of the partnership, for example, like Haiyu, when they put the agricultural products into the Lazada e-commerce website. We also have the cooperation between Watsons and Grab in Southeast Asia in order to reach the new consumers. The second one is about pick and ship model, in which the supermarkets and also mini-marts try in order to apply the supermarket on wheels. And the picture that I can show with you is from Aeon, where they also apply this kind of model. The second one is that how they can satisfy fresh food demand. We all know that this is from the consumers, they seeking for the fresh food products a lot during the COVID-19 situation. So this is not only from the supermarket, mini-marts or convenience store, but we can see that even mom and baby channel, even health and beauty stores, now they also sell fresh food products to the consumer. And the second one is that in order to reduce the timing of the shoppers at store, as well as to increase the convenience for the shopper, they also sell in combo selling. And the sample that I show here is from Mega Market with the combo selling of vegetables products. The last but not least is how they can push online and how they can do the payment without cash. So in this situation, we know that even traditional trade stores, they also put the products on the social media and do the bank transfer as a payment. And the last but not least is from website. This is not only from the retailer itself, but this is even the pictures here is from British, a footwear store. They also sell vegetables on their own website. So we can see that how innovative all the retailers now they are doing, right? And the question that we may ask is that when we talk about e-commerce, how Vietnam market is compared to other Asian countries? So we divided here into two sectors. So the first one is that we base on the maturity of e-commerce, and the second one is about the size and growth of e-commerce in order to divide or in order to sector the countries. So we can see from here is that from China and South Korea, they can be called as the digital leader because the market already mature in terms of e-commerce development, and they lead the way in terms of measurement and analytics for e-commerce as well. For India, they fall into the fast modernizer because the fast growing with high innovation that they are doing right now, they are also more fragmented and complexity as compared to the other markets. Majority of the Asian countries, including Vietnam right now, we are in the developing digitalizer. Why we say so? Because this is the fast growing e-commerce as what we can see because of the regional platform driven, for example, like Lazada, Shopee, or TP. And what we need to understand is about how we can measure e-commerce in terms of the business and also how we can understand the shopper behavior better. So in this one, when we're coming back to Vietnam market, based on the statistics of by 2020, we know that Vietnam market e-commerce is really potential with 18% in terms of the growth rate by 2020 versus year ago. So it reaching the revenue by 11.8 billion, contribute 5.5% of the total retail sales. We also see the habit shift of the consumer and shopper when they increase in online expenditure by 20% and they reduce by 50% in out-of-home consumption. We also record the high number in terms of the e-commerce traffic as well as the digital transformation in e-commerce Vietnam. So the last part that I would like to share with you is how we can understand about online shoppers in Vietnam. So when we talk about the online shoppers in Vietnam, the first one that we care is about whether they're changing in terms of the categories that they purchase online. Also similar to what Arvin already shared with you, we see that the increasing categories purchased online over the last 6 months based on the survey that we conducted in 2021 in 3 key cities, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Da Nang, with a sample size more than 1,000 of online shopper responded. We see that the increase in terms of food and beverage industry, they put into the basket, increase for personal care products, also technology, because they are working at home right now, with the home care products as well. And the last but not least is about mom and baby. With the COVID-19 situation, it's also impact in terms of fashion and sport categories and travel and entertainment industry. The next one that we're gonna ask is about how the consumer or the online shoppers, they are paying right now. We all know in Vietnam market is about cash on delivery every year, but now the market already changing. So now when we look at it here, e-wallet already surpassed COD cash on delivery to become the most common payment for online transaction. And this is due to the contactless payment encouragement from the government, as well as the support of the suppliers with lot of promotion offers. By 2020, only 53% of the shoppers, they pay using e-wallet, but by 2021, it's increasing up to 71%. But they still rely on promotions. So 59% of the shoppers right now, when we ask, they take advantage of special offer and promotion from the e-commerce website as well as the own website of the retailers. When we have new shoppers to join in, means that more concerns also increasing. And this is how we can record some of the top concerns to share with you. By 2020, when we asked about the online shopper, only 30% of the shopper concerned about the product quality. But now moving to 2021, they concern up to 70% of the shopper, they concern about the actual products, whether it's the same as the website description or not, and poor product quality that they receive. The second one is about the touch and feel of the products, because they cannot go into the stores in order to touch the products, right? So 50% now, this is also the concern of the consumer. And the last but not least is about delivery fee, the delivery time, as well as the product exchange policy. So the concern increased from 4% of the online shopper mentioned, now up to 43% of the online shopper they mentioned about this one. So in order to win in Vietnam e-commerce, there are 3 key points that Nelson IQ would like to share back to you all. The first one is that as the manufacturers or the retailers, what we need to care is about the long-term benefits to the consumers. They want to concern about the ease of product to use. This is whether the product available for them or not, whether the range of goods that you put on the e-commerce or the website is a lot or not. How about the price of in-store versus online? And the last but not least is that how can we improve in terms of logistics? The second one is about the omni-channel shopping mentality. Online is not everything. It should be the integration between offline and online in multiple formats. And what we also aim at is that at the end of the day, increase the foot traffic into the stores and enhance the shopper experience. Last but not least is move with speed and purpose. So right now, all the things are really uncertain. How can we move with more flexible and also more and faster so that we can win in terms of the e-commerce business? Yep. So this is the whole for the sharing section from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tran, for the insightful presentation and also for the statistics. I think it's good enough for our participants to have an update, the updated information and see the current trends. So now we will move. I already see some questions, but I would like to tell the participants to wait a little bit more so we can discuss all the questions at the end of the webinar. Yes, so we will move now with Matthew's presentation to discuss a bit further how to set up your e-commerce business and overcome challenges, mainly regulatory challenges. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
Fantastic, thank you. So my screen's okay?
Yes, all good.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Nora. And we've seen some of the statistics. I'm going to go through some of the practical side about establishing an entity in Vietnam for e-commerce, coming from a foreign perspective, but also look at the local, because there is 2 elements, but we'll focus on the foreign perspective here. If my works. Just a quick background. I've been in Vietnam 16, coming up 17 years, a former president of the Australian Chamber of Commerce, and I started Acclaim Vietnam about 7 years ago to provide services to foreign investors. Acclaim is part of a regional group. We have operations across Asia and into Europe and in the Americas, and it's about foreign investors inbound. In Vietnam, we have 3 cities, staff in Hanoi, Da Nang, and Ho Chi Minh City, a bit over 130 staff at the moment, and our range of services is quite broad: market entry, advisory, transaction, accounting, tax, payroll, business compliance. So it's a full range of services to help and protect foreign investors in market. Now, the main part of this, and we'll try to keep this brief, there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to go too technical, but I do want to explain some of the issues, and I'm going to start on the basics, so company establishment. So as a foundation, for those who don't know, in Vietnam, you must have business lines as your foundation. What is the business permitted to do? And you can only earn revenue from permitted activities. Not all business lines are permitted. So only those which are committed under WTO are effectively allowed. Others have particular techniques or processes to go through, and some are not permitted at all. Ownership, so the example, you've got to require a co-investment for travel or advertising, your road transportation is 50% restricted, and there are others with sub-licensing, which is what we're going to be dealing with here, retail, F&B, etc. There are sub-licensing. Some sub-licensing is straightforward, some not so straightforward, as we'll go through. But that's your starting point. So if you were starting a foreign invested company and it was not restricted, this is your sort of timeline you're looking at. You're looking at the first stage where you're applying for an IRC, which is the Foreign Investment Approval process. The second stage, you're looking for the ERC, which is the Company Certificate of Incorporation. And then you look at any sub-licensing stamps and things that you need to deal with. And that's fairly typical for a consulting or an unrestricted business. So there's your foundation that you're looking at, that get things together, apply for your IRC, your foreign approval, apply for your ERC, and then do your post-licensing establishment, your stamps, etc. So that's the foundation. Locally owned companies do not need the IRC. That second step, that stage that you're looking at, my pointer here, this stage is not required for foreign investors. But if there is committed, if it requires approval from ministries, so if it's non-committed, if it's a ministerial approval, this is what gets stretched out. It is this step that gets stretched out. So a couple of other things, a company must have a legal representative, or at least one, and must generally reside in Vietnam. Must have a valid lease address, relevant for the business lines too. So if you're doing a factory manufacturing, you will need to have a facility that meets the requirements, and you must have evidence of sufficient funds. And these documents need notarizing and legalizing and go through the consularization process that you may not be, or may not be familiar with, and they're an important part of just getting the documents together. So that's fine for so far. We hit things. So I mentioned sub-licenses. So this is where things start getting relevant for e-commerce. So a trading license as a sub-license is required for trading, for retail, offline, online. For trading, you need a sub-license. And a sub-license requires application at the Department of Industry and Trade. Certain things may go to the ministry, which will slow things down. And you're looking at things like rice, sugar, and other items that may need to go ministry, but generally trading license is a process. You've got to make sure that the investor is part of the WTO, because if the investor is coming into Vietnam and is not from a country that is not part, they will generally reject the application. You need to make sure you have a financial plan. If the company's been in existence more than a year, you must make sure the taxes are all met with. And we have seen scenarios where companies have been around a long time doing wholesale. They may have lost some money in the early stages and now profitable, but the authorities require them to recapitalise or capitalise loans in order for their business plan to be approved. So they do go through this in detail to make sure that you do have the ability for, if you're looking for trading, for do retail, that you have the capacity to complete. The fact that the company exists in Vietnam and you're adding this does not necessarily mean you'll be approved. They do assess things. It's supposed to take, in process, 40 odd days, in practice 2 to 3 months. That's an expectation because the authorities do examine and they request additional documents. So the prescriptive guide timelines are not as relevant as the process that we see go through. So just keep that in mind, that this trading license, if you are doing offline or online, this is important. So that's, if you do this element, you've got the ability to do trading. And that steps us into, I want a website, I want to do e-commerce, I want to do an app. So that next step is where we get the next element of complications in setting up business. So what is e-commerce? So the WTO definition of production, distribution, marketing, sale, or delivery of goods and services by electronic means is, if you're inclusive, Vietnam states in Decree 52 that activities are conducted at part or whole. So it's any part of the process by commercial activity by means of electronic, internet, telecommunications, or other open networks. It's very vague and broad, but we can basically come down to that it is the creating commercial transactions by electronic means. And that is important, that this is broad, because it does come back to bite sometimes in the application process we'll talk about later. So that broad definition is a little bit frustrating. So within that, the Vietnamese authorities look at 3 types of e-commerce activities: website, apps, or mobile communication networks. And that's sort of the direct transfers and direct payments. It's not completely clear, but by the authorities, how they're treated, it's that direct peer-to-peer process that bypasses the usual apps that we use, the third-party apps. More importantly, they're assessing these under 4 criteria. An e-commerce sales website, which we'll touch on each of these separately because it's very important, e-commerce trading floor, online promotion website, and online auction website. An e-commerce sales website, that's the most common we see, and that's your self-trading. That's that you have selling your products on your website. And if your own commercial production, sales, importation, wholesaling, that you're now retailing via a website, that's the standard. So your website, your .com domain, your products, that's it. That's what goes on there. And that is the most common, and that is also the most straightforward, as we'll see later, and that is the first method. The second is a trading floor, is what we would otherwise call a website or a platform. And that is where other organizations are allowed to trade together. So this is your Lazada, your Shopee, your Tiki type scenario, and that allows third parties to trade on the website. And you can booths, you can open branches. They're quite, they always have reference back to a physical. When they're still writing the laws in Vietnam regarding e-commerce, there's a reference back to physical, but the concept is that it's very similar to your Amazon type scenario for providing a platform for sale. The online promotion websites is the deal of the day, the hot deals type website, and we see them becoming popular, less so in Vietnam at this stage, but that's a specific category that is assessed in relation to those. You can do customer cards, you can do excess stock being promoted and bidding on things. So it's quite, that's that I would most is the hot deal of the day type scenario. And the fourth one is online auction websites. Now this is your traditional eBay, but then again, your eBay would now fit across most of those categories. A lot of the platforms you see now cover a broad range, not just one. So you can fall into a number of categories and you'll be assessed against each of those categories in your application. And that assessment is important because if you want to have that e-commerce license, you've got a trading license, but it doesn't mean you can run the website or run a retail store. You need a retail license for that. So this is that Vietnamese process of company, trading license, and then how you're going to trade. So how do you register your website? How do you get that sub-license for the e-commerce? Well, we start, step, Ministry, Industry and Trade is the authority, there's a portal, you go online, and that all sounds nice and easy. You register, and that can be done. It's not that difficult to get on and do that. So, which is you'd expect, given that it's an e-commerce registration, that it would be relatively straightforward. It splits at the next step. The blue logo is for your own website, and that's relatively straightforward. The second one is for the red tick is for those who are running those platforms, auction websites, promotion websites. And that is where you need to, when you're going through, to make sure that you are registering the right area. A quick tip here is that when you are registering this, the authorities are looking at things already. Are you already trading without being registered? So as soon as you put your data in here to say, I'd like to apply for an application, the authorities know it, and the department in the province where you are will be following you. So if you are already trading, already running e-commerce and not yet registered, there's a risk that the authorities will go, hey, we're seeing what you're doing, and we have seen penalties being issued, quite significant penalties, where people are having pending applications but have already started trading. Because you've already given the game away to the authorities through this process that you wish to register the website, they know what they're looking at. So be careful if you're going through that process. It's a trick that we see happen regularly where the authorities, people go, I'll test the water first, then I'll register. Well, the authorities will be likely inclined to fine because they do treat this quite stringently when they do review. So some of the structural issues that are coming through on that basis, because you can only take the activities which are licensed, you need, and sub-licenses, you can be complicated to go through all those steps. So if you're doing your own product, you must make sure those products are on your primary license. So primary business lines must allow you to trade those products. There's no point going further down if you don't have that. So you need to know what you're going to trade. You make sure your business lines cover what you're intending to do. Where you want to do the trading for the business lines, you need to go through and get the approval from the company perspective business lines, which is very hard because they're restricted. I'll touch on that. Next slide. Because e-commerce activities are not mentioned in WTO's commitments, they are generally seeking ministerial approval, both from the Ministry of Planning and Investment for your company, establishment for your business lines, and the trading and the e-commerce. And that's where it becomes a problem. So basically, running your own business on your own website is fine. That's just a documentation process and a capability process. Running one of those platforms as a foreign investor is difficult and is not encouraged. The authorities are generally trying to decrease the ability for foreign investors to do that unless there is a significant case to be made. And so it does become difficult as a startup to start a platform. Quite often it is a joint venture, it is an arrangement with a local provider, and that is one of the paths. So we tend to, I've put some boxes on the screen here of where we see these ending up. So the first top left is that we have your own products, a company in Vietnam will sell your own product on your own website. You need to get your business lines, your trading license, and your e-commerce license. They're all achievable. It's a process. You must have capability, but it's a process. If you're doing your products on a third-party platform where you are not running that e-commerce platform, you will still need a trading license to sell your products and the right business lines, but you don't need an e-commerce license. You can sell your products on Lazada or Shopee, whatever, with your trading license without requiring yourself to actually have any approvals for e-commerce. That's very, very common, and that's where most of the activity is happening. We'll go back down here, that if you are not selling to consumers, then you may not require, if you're selling to e-commerce operators and you're not selling to consumers, then you may not require a trading license because you're not trading to end consumers. Now, B2B is an interesting one, where you may need an e-commerce license, but you may not need trading if there's no end consumers. And that's an interesting scenario. And the authorities do struggle with that sometimes on those applications. They deem a lot of them as being potentially used by end consumers. They want a trading license, but fundamentally, the law does not require a trading license in all situations. And that's a bit of a tricky one. But if you're selling to e-commerce operators and they are doing the trading, you will not need a trading license. Now, if we come over here, operating a platform, we've got Ministry of Planning and Investment issues with our business lines and our trading license. We've got issues on, well, actually the trading license is an MIT issue that they refer to MPI, and then e-commerce with MIT. You will see roadblocks along the way, each of those three steps if you're a foreign investor. It is difficult, and so the practice of their joint venture arrangements is the most common that we see. I'll just touch on this last point there. If you're a foreign entity wishing to sell into Vietnam and you have your own website abroad, you're only selling products or services into Vietnam and you are not having a permanent establishment or a operation here, the authorities don't stop that, but they have introduced tax regulations recently where you are required to, and we're in transition process, to obtain a tax code and charge taxes and remit taxes to the authorities, either via a domestic agent or yourself for the first time being able to do it yourself. So there are tax requirements and there are implications to banks and payment providers if you don't register and don't do those taxes. We'll see where that pans out because it is new legislation. It is in progress at the moment. There's been some deferrals, and so that is another option to keep in mind, and making sure the tax compliance exists in order to be able to sell to domestic consumers. If you don't, we haven't seen implications whether they'll block you, whether they'll do website blocking. We don't know, but it'll be interesting to see where that comes out. And that's the questions for the Q&A coming up after this English presentation, and I'll leave it there and hand back to Laura.
Thank you very much, Matthew. very interesting information, and I think we give some good advice to companies interested in setting up their e-commerce business in Vietnam. So now let's look into a very sensitive topic: how to tackle online counterfeiting issues in Vietnam. And here we have with us Misian Wu, who is also an external expert of the Southeast Asia IPSME Helpdesk, and we let her dive straight into the topic. So Yen, the floor is yours. I already see your screen, so all good.
Thanks very much, Nora. Good morning, Europe. Good afternoon, Asia and Vietnam. I'm very pleased to be invited to speak to you relating to some issues relating to online enforcement and the proposed amendment to the e-commerce decree, which usually referred to as Decree 52. Here is an outline of my presentation today. First of all, I will briefly walk you through the general landscape of counterfeit issues on some e-commerce platforms, and secondly, the enforcement options against the trading of counterfeits on e-commerce platforms. And last but not least, I will introduce some proposed amendment to the e-commerce decree and the implication of it on online enforcement. So before we start, I would like to run a quick poll questions, and Chang from the IPR Helpdesk would help me to run this. So the question is, do you have any IPR registered in Vietnam?
Yes, so we would like participants to pick yes or no. There is no wrong answer, so please don't worry, and then we will share the result, and Yan will comment on that, and also maybe she can convince the ones who said no to make up their mind by the end of this webinar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we can share the result. So yeah, 70% no and 30% yes, they have an IPR registered in Vietnam.
Okay, well, I think, you know, Nora and also other IP practitioners in the Southeast Asia IPR Helpdesk, and also IP practitioners in Europe and Vietnam agree with us that you should really protect your IP rights, even if you contemplating entering to Vietnam, because bad faith filings is one of the key issues that we notice, and it's a real problem, which can be an obstacle, and you would need to get rid of it, you know, the bad faith filings, before protecting your rights in Vietnam. And so by all means, we would really encourage you to file your trademarks or your patent or design, even before entering Vietnam. Okay, and the next question is, do you use e-commerce platforms to sell your products in Vietnam?
Yeah, so this is a second question, just for us to understand a little bit more on your background. Maybe you are planning to sell in the future, but we would like to know about the current status. And this may also impact the first question. Okay, the result is quite stable. So yeah, let's share. Okay, so it's almost half-half, actually, quite interesting. Half of the participants are already selling on e-commerce platforms in Vietnam.
Okay, that's very interesting to see. And I do really hope that some respond to the first question also respond to the second questions, which, you know, imply that for all of you that actually carried out your business in e-commerce platforms in Vietnam and you haven't registered your rights, by all means, please do so, because that would be the powerful tools to act against counterfeits and copycats, as you've seen earlier in Eric's slides. and also, you know, I will provide some more information on the current situation with counterfeits in Vietnam on online channels, and also some enforcement options. But it is really, you know, highly advisable that you should register your rights, and that would be the tools for you to enforce your rights. Okay, so let's move on. This is just a quick overview of the e-commerce activities in Vietnam. As my fellow speakers have already touched upon this issue earlier, so you would see that in 2020, the standalone websites or e-commerce platforms have become the most popular online shopping channel among Vietnamese consumers, around 74%. And this is according to a survey and shared by the Ministry of Industry and Trade in the Vietnam e-commerce white book. And we've also seen a decline of forum social networks and mobile commerce applications as means of online shopping. Of all the type of goods and services that are usually purchased online, food account for more than 50%, followed by clothing, footwear, cosmetics. Electronic and technology products accounts for only 23% of goods usually purchased online, but they are most likely to be counterfeits. The others are clothing, footwear, and cosmetics, as well as household appliance, as you've seen in color codes in this slide. However, this picture is changing very quickly, given the impact of the pandemic upon us and the surge of online shopping, which has become quickly the only means available to us consumers in some areas or cities in Vietnam, including in Ho Chi Minh City. We're certainly seeing a different picture with counterfeits becoming the most serious issues for online shopping, and not just in Vietnam, but also a global issue. And this partially resulted from the significant drop in protection supply in areas heavily impacted by COVID in the context of increased consumers' demands. So worldwide and in Vietnam since last year, enforcement authorities have discovered many serious cases relating to medical healthcare products that are counterfeits, as you've seen reported in the news in this slide. For example, fake medical face masks, fake COVID test kits, and even fake COVID vaccines. Some listings relating to medical healthcare products relating to COVID are found in some popular e-commerce platforms, and we urge manufacturers, distributors, or IP right holders of these goods carefully monitoring the sales of them, especially online. In terms of enforcement efforts against counterfeits, there is certainly an upticking of fines imposed on infringers. In the first 9 months of 2020, the Market Management Agency in Vietnam inspected more than 2,400 cases, handed over 2,200 violations, and imposed fines worth over 16 billion Vietnamese dong, which is around $700,000 for violations on e-commerce sites. For the first half of 2021, the number of administrative cases increased by 6.18% over the same period in 2020. So now let's have a look at the enforcement options or strategy against the trading of counterfeits in the e-commerce platforms. Listings of counterfeits on major e-commerce platforms have the potential to cause brand dilution, brand damage, and diversion of sales from authorized channels. And given the growing importance of e-commerce in Vietnam, as you've seen earlier, and the ability of consumers across the world to access e-commerce platforms, there is a need to clean up the counterfeits on the online environment and reduce their visibility on e-commerce platforms. In these slides here, you would see the steps that usually taken by IP owners. So the first step is obviously data gathering, where they would collect information relating to the situation with counterfeits of their products. Usually, this would start off with a search using certain keywords in some e-commerce platforms. The next step would be to file a takedown request and follow up with the website owners or e-commerce platforms. The next step would be monitoring new listings that popping up after this first round of takedown request. And the second step would be very important, which is of the offline actions against key infringers. And so actually the final step, or the fourth step in here, closely relates to the second step in green in this slide. And so in reviewing the listings that actually resulted from a research over e-commerce platforms, for example, Lazada, Tiki, or Shopee, then you would need to review this. And before filing takedown requests to the e-commerce platforms, you would need to ponder upon whether there is any mid-size or large-size infringer that you come across in some other actions in some other countries, for example, that you would need to keep it for offline actions, which is the enforcement actions carried out by enforcement authorities, but not include them into the listings where you send to the e-commerce websites or e-commerce platforms to request them to take down. This is to avoid alerts to infringers that can impact your offline enforcement effort. I would like to note here that this is, for today, we only mention the most practical means to remove counterfeits from online channels, which is to work with e-commerce platforms and e-commerce website owners. In later slides, where we speak about the proposed change to the e-commerce decree, you will see that the government imposed an obligation for e-commerce platforms to resolve complaints for customers. Currently, they don't have that obligation, which is to respond to the notice sent by IP owners. But now, under the draft decree, they are proposed to have this obligation. And so brand owners or IP holders can always file a complaint to the authority, which is the Inspectorate of Ministry of Information and Communications, to request the removal of the infringing listing or counterfeits. So this is a legal option, a legal right vested into brand owners or IP holders. If they can't request the website owners or e-commerce platforms to remove the counterfeits or infringing listings, then you would have a legal option of going to the enforcement authority, which is Inspectorate of MIC in this case. And in addition to that option, if the MIC, the Inspectorate of MIC, agree with your complaint, then they will come to the website owners or e-commerce platforms to request them or force them to remove the counterfeits or the infringing listings of the website or of the platforms. In addition to that option, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, the MOIT, also launches a portal for any complaints about counterfeits on online channels to be lodged in there for them to review and take actions. And so it's good to use the platform run by the MOIT to send complaints regarding standalone websites or applications. This is more information, provide more detailed information than the first slide, the previous slide, about the steps to take down infringing goods or counterfeits. So these 4 steps are actually closely related to each other. After these steps, you can always initiate another round of carrying them out again. So the first step of data gathering usually it is the very first step that brand owners or IP holders carried out. So they would collect data on suspicious listing across the platforms. Then they would confirm the infringing nature of the listing identified, whether they actually genuine or they are counterfeit. Confirm the reasons for claims of infringement, which is to review the legal grounds for taking actions. And this is actually to verify whether you have any rights protected in Vietnam, for example, for your trademark, for your patent, for your design. So this is very important that you need to register your rights in Vietnam as soon as possible, as Vietnam embraced the first to file principle in granting protection. And the last step of this phase is to make test purchase and collect necessary evidence to support the claim of infringement. The test purchase is very important because it relates to evidence collection, and you should keep the purchase, the sample purchase from the e-commerce website or e-commerce platforms in a safe place in order to take, offline enforcement later on if you need to. The second step would be to file takedown request and then follow up with the website owners or with the e-commerce platforms. And so based on the claims of IP infringement or counterfeiting, you would then send an email, usually via their portal or their email address. And that usually need to be supported by evidence gathering from the first step to support the claims of infringement. And each major e-commerce platforms, usually they would have their own team responding to the complaints or requests or notice coming from brand owners or IP owners. The first step would be monitoring the new listings. So in this step, after a while, usually, several days to maybe 1 or 2 weeks, then the owner of websites or the e-commerce platforms would comply with your request and remove the listings of counterfeits or infringing products. Then at this third step, you would monitor after a while, usually a month or 2 months or 3 months, to see whether there is any new listings coming up, or whether there is already listings subject to the second step that actually popping up again when you do the recheck. And the final step is the offline actions against key infringers. So based on the data collected and outcome of the takedown request, then we can identify some significant sellers for offline investigations and enforcement actions. So due to the time constraint, I will not go through the offline enforcement actions with the authorities. So I think we all know that there are some significant challenges to the enforcement here. Firstly is the volume of listings. And usually it can go up to 20,000 of listings for just one e-commerce platform by, providing just one keyword. So the volume is huge. And the second challenge is about resources and speed. So you would need to have your own team reviewing the listings resulted from the research, or you can outsource it to a service provider to review those listings. And then, the key thing to do here is to identify from the listings that you gathered, which one is actually counterfeit or which one is actually suspected infringing products or copycats. And so that is the resource challenge on your side. And there's also a resource challenge on the e-commerce platforms or website at their end, even though they have a own team. And by speaking to some major e-commerce platforms in Vietnam, we know that they keep hiring people to add up to that team. The workload is huge, given the listings, the popularity of e-commerce as a means of online shopping these days. And so usually that would relate to another challenge of speed, whether they would comply with your request within several days. Because if you leave those listings and you believe that they counterfeits or copycats, and you leave them in those e-commerce platforms for several days, that can impact heavily the actual sales of your genuine products on that online platform, or even the brick and mortar stores physically. And then another challenge is the custom challenge. So counterfeits is primarily a cross-border problem. In a recent report that we wrote to the UK government last year, about 75% of counterfeits in Southeast Asia coming from China. And so we usually advise our clients to work with customs locally and even regional or global level to detain suspected incoming goods that are actually counterfeits. So this usually starts with a request for applications of custom monitoring measures. We usually refer to them as custom recorder on certain trademark and certain products. We also suggest to engage closely with customs and providing training to them to be more effective in helping you. So this is a significant problem.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. Sorry, yeah. One small comment. Because of the time constraint, I wanted to suggest that maybe we skip the case study, and
okay.
And so we have a little bit more time for the Q&A because we see some questions. So we wanted to also discuss with the participants, if that's okay with you.
Okay, yeah, totally agree. And I will also run very quickly through the last part of the presentation relating to the e-commerce decree. Yeah, so this is the repeated infringing sellers, and they keep popping up again and again after several rounds of notice and takedown with the e-commerce platforms. And so what to do with this? So we usually recommend our clients to carry out meetings with platforms to address the repeated infringement and set out common grounds to deal with further issues. For example, encourage the platforms to ban the account or at least freeze the account for a certain period of time if they see the repeated infringement. And we also suggest to organize training for the platforms on counterfeit identifications. However, as I mentioned earlier, the moderation team from platforms face great obstacles coming from large number of product listings, from infringers' multiple accounts, which can be easily done by just using several personal identifications or email address, and also the platform's limited knowledge on the brand products, and so on and so forth. So given the time constraint, I will not go through the case study, but the key thing here is, the impact of the counterfeit sales. After we help this client to remove thousands of listings on 7 largest e-commerce platforms in Vietnam, they actually see the sales figure of the genuine products increase significantly. So I will now quickly go through the draft amendment of the e-commerce decree. As you all know, the draft amendment to the decree 72, which usually refers to as the Internet Decree, was issued later last year, and is now at the government for their review, and hopefully to be issued later in this year. So the information we presented here is only related to the issue of the online enforcement and the obligations imposed on the e-commerce websites and e-commerce platforms relating to that problems. So we've noticed that the draft amendment improved the transparency, and the government is proposing to request sellers to publicize certain information, as you've seen in this slide here, and impose certain obligations on standalone e-commerce websites to provide, for example, scope of liabilities of sellers. E-commerce platforms require sellers to provide name, contact details, business registration information in Vietnamese, and also they must publish certain policies relating to goods inspection, and so on and so forth. Relating to the actions against violations and dispute resolution, on the right side of the slides, you would see the government is proposing to impose additional obligations on e-commerce and platforms. They must, for example, receive and handle complaints of consumers within just 24 hours from receiving the authority's request, or cooperate with IP right holders for the notice and takedown process that I mentioned earlier. This is quite straightforward, so I will not go through this. So what are the implications on enforcement of the proposed amendment? In our point of view, we think that the proposed amendment would better protect consumers' rights, provide transparent information for both, e-commerce platforms and also consumers, and enhance the cooperation between the stakeholders, which is the authority, the MIC, the MOIT, intermediaries, which means here the e-commerce platforms, as well as right holders who are brand owners. And so the key takeaways is to consult with local IP agents or lawyers to devise a strategy for online monitoring and takedown, and keep a close watch on the counterfeits, and highly recommend you to run online monitoring program, especially in this period where a lot of consumers, for example, in Ho Chi Minh City, they need to go through online shopping because all of the shops are closed due to the lockdown order. We also recommend to contact e-commerce platforms at a high level and perhaps maybe sign an MOU with them to, so that they can help you, to take actions against the counterfeits or copycats better. And last but not least, the online-offline actions is always to be included in your enforcement strategy. Thank you for your attention. Now back to you, Nora.
Yes, thank you very much, Jan, for all the tips, and also outlining a little bit how counterfeiting works in e-commerce platforms. So, okay, now we are going to move to the Q&A session. We just wanted to show you one slide about some e-commerce materials that the Helpdesk has available. So we have a guide on how to remove counterfeit products from e-commerce platforms. Yes, we are sharing it now, and then an infographic on e-commerce in Southeast Asia, a little bit about the industry and also the IP-related aspects. So you have the links on the PPT that we will share with you later. So you can check out these materials as well if you're interested in this topic. And with that, I would like to give the floor now to my colleague Benoit, who will be running the Q&A. So still you have time to write in your questions in the question box, and please, we will ask the questions now, handle the questions now. Thanks.
Okay, let's go, because there are received many questions. So I try to collect them and put them together for the same topic. We had one question. Was, can we see the consumer journey moving to e-commerce during COVID-19 and e-commerce trend for automotive industry at the post-pandemic? I don't know if someone, either Matthew or Chan, has any specific comments on this.
Better for you to comment on that one, I would think.
Yep. So I think what I can share from our perspective is that even for the automotive, this is not the area that the consumer is talking about. when we ask about the intention to purchase in the next segments. But what I believe is that right now, for most of the industries right now, e-commerce is a room for all of the industries in order to develop and to consider. Of course, we don't move 100% to online, right? But we need to see that how the online channel can support in terms of our business development, as well as ensure in terms of sustainable growth for the business. So I think even this is talking about the alternative, or when I look at the chat box, I also see some of the questions related to agriculture inputs, or the trends of the motorcycle park, etc. This is what we need to think right now on how we educate the consumers, especially now the consumers are more well educated during the COVID-19 situation. So if the suppliers can take the chance in order to educate them more and also have the engagement effort with the shoppers there. So then later on, it will come in terms of the revenue later. Of course, we cannot count on them as 100%, right? But we should start on this in order to have the integrated part between online and offline channels.
Okay, thank you very much, Chan. I don't know if we will go maybe to another question, and maybe Matthew can share something. I saw one about among all industries, which one do we expect to bounce back the fastest after the pandemic? Would it be still e-commerce channels, or back to traditional channels, or like a mixed perspective?
I might start from a general business perspective, and as I mentioned, most of my clients are foreign inbound investors. We're seeing still business proceeding as normal. We're seeing the domestic market very cautious, and so it's going to be a dual track going ahead. That caution to me indicates that people won't be venturing out. That consumption won't be as much. So online definitely is going to be opportunistic as people get comfortable. So from it's really interesting watching how the perceptions of other countries towards Vietnam, but also the Vietnamese domestic market. So I definitely see that taking advantage now and doubling down on e-commerce and the platforms into the future. The other part of this is it's changing our mindset. It's changing how businesses deal with things, submissions, the government authorities. It's changing how people are consuming. And this is a major change in sort of a step forced upon us, as I see it, sort of looking sort of not as an expert in consumer behaviour, but just seeing how we're watching businesses react, consumers react in society. So, Chun, you might want to sort of add or contradict that, but that's how I see it from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I think Matthew already answered the question, right? And what I can add in from what Matthew already mentioned is that, of course, we already see that travel and entertainment impacted a lot during the COVID-19 situation. So after we going through the COVID-19 situation, we can see this is the bounce back for the industry. This is the first one. The second one is that for other industry, whether the consumer will stay online or they will go back into the traditional method, it depends a lot in terms of their experience right now. So shopper experience right now is really essential in order to keep them. They may walk away after the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, thank you very much. I see also a question directly for Matthew. I don't know if you can handle this one. I was talking about decrease online in 2018. Quite a long question, specifying that a foreign invested company must obtain a license when providing electronic commerce services. The decree also defines that e-commerce service refer to business provider who set up e-commerce website and provide this environment for other traders to carry out the service of goods delivery. So per my understanding, only business entity who provide the website to other traders must obtain license. When do you recommend that a business sell its product on its website and also has to obtain a trading license and e-commerce license? I don't know if you can give us some
yeah, so and this is sort of a good topic for discussion is, do you do it on your own? Do you go and establish your own infrastructure, or do you use third parties? Do you use logistical providers that are selling on your behalf? And where do you work through that process? There's no right answer. What we're seeing, and again, I'd love Chun's input on this, is that the platforms that exist now and the major platforms, and I think Zen talked about the 7 main platforms that she was there, they've got a big stake. And so also you've got your distribution, your Grabs and your and sort of your Now type platforms as well. They're very dominant. Do you wish to just jump into one of those dominant platforms? Are you going to fight the Amazon sort of mindset, or are you going to do your own, or is it a balanced approach? It depends on your consumers, and it depends upon where you are in your business cycle. As an entry point, it's much easier taking someone's existing platform. If you have an existing retail outlet, you have your licenses, adding e-commerce to that business is not a significant effort to do so. So it's a point where you can look at different businesses, different industries, and different life cycles of where you should go. It does get expensive if you are a new entrant trying to do everything. So you've sort of got to pick a channel. Where you're going to struggle is if you're trying to do a new platform. The new platform will take a lot of money, both from a regulatory but a marketing issue to start that. So you've got to pick your path and where you want to go. So I don't know whether that answers the question fully, but that's where I would be looking at, is just where you are, where the cycle is, what you're trying to sell, what your competitors are doing, and what sort of stock levels, where you're going to hold it. Did someone else hold stock? Are you going to own your stock? Are you going to be responsible? All of those matters are important.
Thank you. I see that we also received a question on IP topic for Ian. It was a question for Mekong Quilts, social enterprise making high quality bed covers. And there was a person telling us that they applied for intellectual property right. In fact, it was a design, industrial design, and it was declined as the design cannot be protected. It was like something like 10 years ago. Do you have some maybe some quick tips to give to this person, Yin?
Thanks, Benoit. Many thanks for the question for me concludes. Well, design or industrial design is certainly protected in Vietnam, and the usual requirements are they must be novel and they must be industrial applicable. And usually, one failure of design owners, which makes the design can be protected, is they disclose the design by distributing the products to the market, or launching it in exhibitions and so on, before protecting the designs, or not protecting the design within the grace period of 6 months. So if you launch the products, or if you do an exhibition with your products that employs the design, then you have a grace period of 6 months from that date to file an application to protect the design. So that's usually the challenge in protecting the design. And so I don't know, your particular case. What is the problem with the designs that can't be protected? And so if you can send me more information, I will certainly looking into that.
Yes, I think it would be better to receive some more information, and then we could be able to help this person. And maybe there are a lot of things to tell on our other IP rights to protect such things. So maybe I have a question now for cross-border e-commerce in Vietnam. What are the requirements? And there was also a question on the same topic, with what a foreign supplier should be do to be able to sell their goods via cross-border e-commerce in Vietnam. I don't know if Matthew or Chan has any information to share on this specific topic.
Cross-border digital products are much easier to deal with. It is a tax registration, whether you're doing it on platforms or others. It's a bit easier to deal with. You do have goods product, you will need a partner. You need someone to make sure your products are imported, the import taxes are paid, that your repatriation of cash, and it becomes quite a bit harder. The reality is, if you have products, you are outside, you don't have a presence in Vietnam, and you don't want to start an entity, you will need to talk to one of the platforms to operate for you and to go through the logistical issues and the funds transfers issues, because they're the two biggest problems you'll face: is product importation and funds repatriation. And they're significant issues. You could start your own enterprise, and then you can be the importer. You can repatriate funds and go through that process and deal with taxes domestically, or use one of the platforms to do that. There are agents out there who are experts who will hold your hand and guide you through, but ultimately they'll be working with the platforms as well. That multi-channel approach sometimes is beneficial to have an agent, but it's the platforms who will be able to act for you and work through you in those scenarios. Digital, it's easier to do it yourself. You can register, it's online, you can get a tax code and your taxes and be a good compliant citizen. If those are in Vietnam at the moment, you may not be paying taxes on your Netflix, etc. subscription. It will be kicking in soon, so just be aware.
So besides what Matthew already mentioned, I think what I can add in terms of the consumer understanding, because actually when we go cross-border, right? So this is a change in terms of the consumer behavior as well. Whether the consumer like the products or not, how about the competitors are going there, how they put the products online, etc. So this is what we need to really understand about the competition landscape, as well as the consumer and shopper behavior, so that we need to ensure that our success in another market.
Okay, thank you very much, Chan and Matthew. And we have one last question. Well, there are still other pending questions, but maybe we'll try to address them by email because we're running against time. So it was a question in case an e-commerce platform provides its services to a few big users in Vietnam, who will white label the technology in their names and sell their white label products to many individual and SME users. Then does the platform provider need to have a legal status in Vietnam and get the license to provide services from local authorities?
It depends, and this is, you can sort of structure it to go whichever way you want to go, whether the white label party is still the operator, or whether the white label is still a technology provider and someone else is the operator. There needs to be an operator of that website. So it can be done either way. We see this across the Vietnam regulations where they cross over, or you have an opportunity to treat it as one way or the other, with either, is it an IT business providing an IT solution, or is it a website operator providing e-commerce platforms and is taking the registration? So yeah, either, and it may suit you to go either way, by the way. So that's, if I'm an IT company developing websites, white labeling it for third parties, it's probably a great solution, but it doesn't mean you're operating that website, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that we also have a question for Ms. Yen Vu. It could be good to share your thoughts about it. What is the average time to obtain results following a request to take down when you find a list of counterfeiters? We're talking about days, hours, weeks, months. Is it fast? Yeah.
Sorry, thanks, Benoit, and thanks for the question. Well, in our experience, when we work with the e-commerce platforms, usually it's a matter of days. Can be very quick, up to 2 to 3 days. Can be a week. When they are tied up with lots of notice and emails or requests coming from other IP owners. But the key thing is we need to have all our supporting evidence ready and attached to our request to the platforms. And if you see that counterfeits usually pop up in certain platforms, then we would advise you to set up a meeting with the legal team of that platform. And we understand that all major platforms operating in Vietnam, they do have their own legal team, and they have their own in-house team to deal with complaints coming from brand owners. And so once you have that meeting, provide them with information relating to how to differentiate between your goods, genuine goods, and counterfeits or copycats, educate them, provide them with sufficient information. And so, later requests coming from you, I think it would be much easier to be handled by the e-commerce platforms, and it also saves them time and can be very quick in a matter of days.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see that we are now almost over the time limits. So I would say thank you very much to all the speakers. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Chan. Thank you, Yen. Thank you also, Erwin and Delphine. We are always reachable by email address, and you are also invited to follow us on our newsletter and to check our social media. I will maybe hand over a quick last word from Nora, but have a nice afternoon or a day ahead for everyone.
Yes, thank you, Benoit. And yes, I also would like to say warm thank you to all our speakers and also for the participants for staying with us and also sending us interesting questions. This webinar, this Friday, EuroCham is organizing another webinar on the free trade agreement. So if you are interested attending this session, please feel free to sign up. You can find the details on EuroCham website. And for the upcoming webinars of the Helpdesk, yes, check out our website. Remember that we cover the 10 ASEAN countries. So if you're interested in other countries in Southeast Asia, we remain your contact point. So thanks everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, EuroCham. Thanks very much, Nora, Benoit, and everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take
Bye.
care.